my wife and I were sitting there, and I think we might have been drinking some tequila, as one will do in Mexico. And she looks at me and she says, like, are you willing to die for this?
If you could just tell me in one or two sentences, what is a paramedic? What do you do?
Well, the hook line that used to work a lot is I get to fly in helicopters and save babies. And so that was true for a significant portion of my career, but not the entirety of it. But as a paramedic, my main job was to transport sick and injured people between one place and another. But if we back up a little bit, we can describe it as like EMS as a whole is emergency medical services. And there's several different facets inside of that EMS umbrella, mostly being ground transport ambulance. So think about when you get hurt and you need to be transported from wherever you are to the hospital for emergency care. You can call 911, get an ambulance. But there's also the next section, which is the interfacility transfer. So if you're at a facility and you're not able to ride in any other type of vehicle and you need medical attention to get to another facility, you can also be picked up by an ambulance there. And then there's also the flight medicine, which does include rotor and fixed wing. So helicopter or plane aircraft, as you're very familiar with.
So did you work in ambulances before getting into the flight version of it, or did you skip that
Yes.
entirely?
Yeah, no, you don't get to skip that. That's a prerequisite for flight. And the reason why is it's such a dramatic increase in your scope of practice. Like, what am I allowed to do? What drugs am I carrying? What invasive interventions are there? So typically, everybody will have to start on some sort of ground EMS. And then there are a couple of different positions that you can fill in that. So the government kind of looks towards this organization called the NREMT, or the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians. And they are the people who kind of tell the states what criteria they should be looking for somebody to be able to fit this role and responsibility. And then the states adopt a lot of that as their own guide for how to get licensed in their state. So an EMT basic would be somebody who can run an ambulance, run a call, and start performing procedures outside of your body. Think about like applying a tourniquet or ice or bandaging. And then as you get more invasive in the procedures, you move up to EMT intermediate or advanced EMT, and then EMT paramedic. And then you can work on, like I said, either the ground ambulance or flight. But flight, because of the larger scope, will definitely want you to have ground experience as well. And then there are additional certifications that you can get after that, like your CCEMTP or your flight as well. Both of those are advanced certifications beyond the paramedic.
Okay, so that was a great description. The only thing I didn't understand is what is the maybe you didn't say it. What's the difference between a paramedic and an EMT? Can you explain that part?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So an EMT and a paramedic will typically work as partners because they have varying levels of ability to practice. And the difference is really how invasive a procedure can be. So think an EMT can do pretty much anything outside your body, like I said, bandaging or tourniquets or applying ice or checking blood pressure vitals. They can assist you taking your own medications. And then they can do basic airways as well. And then as you advance to the paramedic is when you start getting into pharmacology. Essentially, you're able to give people drugs. You can start IVs, you can do intubations, and you can get much more invasive with your procedures.
Okay. All right, real interesting. How about why did you choose to become a paramedic in the first place?
Yeah, it's kind of a family business. So my dad and my grandfather were both firefighters when I was growing up. I spent a lot of time in and out of fire departments and the station and getting to know those guys. And I actually didn't even really look at it as a career until my wife and I had sold all of our belongings and we moved to Mexico, and we were just kind of hanging out, and I proposed to her while we were there. And so we're just this couple in our young 20s with no time or all the time in the world to sit and say, what do you want out of life? What do you want to do? What are you passionate about? Are you going to go to school? And we were able to have that time to figure it out together. And as I was sitting there, I was really unmotivated to go back to school. And I decided at that time, I was like, something that the only thing I can see that motivates me would be to go back to be a paramedic. So I started researching what is it that I need to do to become a paramedic. And I found out kind of this line of start here and you'll end here. And so before I even came back, I was already signed up for an EMT school by the time I returned, so I could jump right into it.
Okay. Okay. So the EMT school taught you to be a paramedic, or you did the EMT first and then the paramedic? How did that play?
Yeah, so typically EMT basic is its own class. At the time that I took it, it was actually only a 4 month class, and I believe I paid $800 for the class, which it's gone up considerably since then. This is, 17 years ago when I took this class. And then I immediately went into paramedic school afterwards, which at the time was a 9 month class, and it cost me $1,250, which I think right now they're about 2,500, if not more, depending on the school you go to, and it took me a total of 1 year. Now, a lot of people will recommend that you work in the industry as an EMT to first see if you like it, to see if you can handle the responsibility, to see if you're the type of person who's going to enjoy EMS. I do know several people that have gone all the way through, a year and a half training, and they get their paramedic and they're like, it's just really not for me. And I got here and I started working as a paramedic, and now I realize like I don't like doing it very much, and they could have saved themselves a little bit of time and heartache and money and transitioned to something else earlier had they done that work. But I knew what I wanted to do, and so I said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and see it through. I got the time now. We can get it paid for right now. Now have a daughter on the way. I got married right at the end of my EMT class, and my daughter was born 5 days after I finished paramedic school. So it was like I kind of got to jump in, like I got to be there and make the money that a paramedic can make as opposed to making the less money of the EMT.
Yeah. Okay. So I have heard that being an EMT and or a paramedic that the pay isn't great. So can you explain how all that works? What these companies are typically paying people for
Yeah,
these
I
positions?
it's so that's the one thing I would change about EMS is the pay. And it's really a shame the people that are attracted to this who can have the fortitude to manage to succeed in this role and in this job can't always depend on the pay. So, larger picture, the government said back in the 60s with the Highway Transportation Act that we need to have all of this ambulance and emergency medical response for the roads for all these crashes that people were getting in, but then they really declined on how do you pay for it? And so the as you go across the United States, EMS in itself is such a patchwork of pieces put together based on local laws and state laws, as opposed to like this federal look of what can we put in federal standards for, and how are these people going to get paid. So for emergencies, if you get in a car accident and an ambulance has to come and take you, they're going to bill you for that, and they have to recoup some of their costs. And realistically, a lot of them do not get paid for a lot of the transports because you get into the weeds about what is the medical necessity for the transport. A lot of private companies that do the interfacility transports that we were talking about earlier, between one hospital and a nursing home, or between a doctor's office and a hospital, or some place where you have specialty care. If there's no necessity for them to drive in the ambulance and they took it anyway, you're not going to get paid. So it was very important for us as providers to document well, like why this person needs to ride in an ambulance. And then the government, Medicare, Medicaid have a schedule fee where they say, like, this is how much we're going to pay you if you take one of our patients who's on Medicare or Medicaid. Like it's a flat fee. So a lot of the private services will base like how many people do I need to have on staff and how much transports do I need to have scheduled to make enough money, to transport, and how many have to have however many ambulances you want to have.
I guess it's
Mhm.
hard to answer this question because it depends on where you live, and like you said, it's a patchwork system. So, um, what's wow? I guess so. I guess it's hard for you to say brand new EMT. Here's roughly what you might be making. It could be. What would you say though? If you had to put it in a window.
Right when I started, it was about $8 an hour. And the last I looked for EMT basics in my area, North Texas, it was starting anywhere between $13 to $20 an hour, depending on the shift that you work, depending on the company that you worked for. And then when you get to the paramedic level, you'll see it as low as, $18 an hour. And then I've seen upwards of $40, $50 an hour as well for paramedics, depending on your advanced credentialing. So if you're going to be doing flight, you're going to get paid more than somebody who's taking between the ambulance or using the ambulance to take them between the nursing home and the hospital, or between nursing home and dialysis. So, I was fortunate enough to work on a high acuity team for a lot of time. So it was, critically ill and sick patients who really need medical care. So there's like no doubt about, we know we're going to get paid for these transports.
Would you say, are there any premium type pays? In other words, let's say you're working overnight or you're working a holiday or anything like that. Does that ever happen?
Different companies, yes. So it is becoming more of a trend in the industry to give differentials. So depending on where you work, they have a lot of different types of shifts. So I've worked 8-hour trucks, I've worked 10-hour trucks, 12-hour trucks, 15-hour trucks, 24-hour trucks, 26-hour trucks, and you get different. You work
Keep
different
going.
amount of days. Yeah, all of them. I got every truck I worked. I used to work 24 hours and then pick up another 15-hour truck when I got off. Like, oh, that shift wasn't bad. Let me just pick up another 15-hour truck. Um, but they would say,
My God.
the overtime is built in to the 24-hour shift because you're going to get 48 hours every week. And so they pay you less because you're going to make quote unquote the same amount at the end of the year. And then the 15-hour trucks would make a little bit more, the 12-hour trucks would make a little bit more, and the 8-hour trucks would make a little bit more because you have to come in all the different days of the week. When I first started, the very first company I worked for gave us zero PTO. And so, as somebody who's making $12 an hour as a paramedic with a new family and a new child, I could not afford to take any time off. It was like, I got to work 60 hours a week to be able to feed my family. And so, there's not enough time for me to take a week off or take any of that time off.
That's rough. That's really rough. Okay.
Can be.
Well then, the next question I had, you sort of already answered it, but maybe you can expand on it. What's the work-life balance? It sounds like it's not fantastic.
For me, it wasn't. But like I said, I was also in a different place. I had a new wife. I had a new baby. We were committed that my wife be able to stay at home and help raise her as much as she possibly could, which meant that she wasn't out making income like she was before the baby. And so really just we decided like I can go ahead and work more hours. There's always overtime opportunities, like they literally can't staff enough. I've never worked at a company with no overtime opportunity. There's always calls to be run. People are always needing transport. And so I decided like I can just work more hours and I'll make more money. And so I kind of fell into that trap. And then we got used to that income. And so it's hard to replace the income once you know that it can be there. If you work a bunch of hours, you can make a lot of money. It's just you got to keep working. You can't take any of the time off.
Okay.
So
Now, what about your coworkers? I would imagine it almost sounds like this job is kind of like going to war in a way that you're put into these um, difficult situations together with people. So I would imagine the relationships would be kind of interesting amongst your coworkers. Do you want to talk about that?
yeah, absolutely. The way that you interact with somebody when you experience the depth of the range that humanity has to offer as far as like what kinds of scenarios you're going to find yourself in, the tragedy, the chaos. I mean, it's literally buildings on fire and babies screaming, and you're in the middle of this. I would not correlate it with being in a war zone, but there is a lot of EMS that has been derived from the military, right? Like our hierarchy and the way that we have our focus of command and our span of command and span of control is kind of derived from the military. So in that
Mm.
respect, it is like it, but it's this chaotic thing that you've really got to know who you're next to when you experience that. When you watch a child die and you watch that parent cry, and you're just standing there with your partner or partners, experience the depth of humanity in that. It creates relationships and bonds that I've seen nowhere else in my life. And at one point, I had the same two partners. We were a 3-person team for 4 years on the same shift. So for 40 hours a week, every week, I'm in a box, in a little ambulance, or in a helicopter, or in a jet with them for 40 hours a week for years on end, witnessing all of this. And it's not just the bad stuff too, it's the good stuff. You can look at a parent, tell them you saved their baby, and you get a CPR save, and you get that joy and those highs, and you get to experience that collaboratively as well. And so the way that you get to work with people is unlike anything else I've experienced. So I wasn't in the military, but I can imagine that experiencing that what they went through must be very similar as well.
That's really cool. So I'd imagine you still have friends from the job.
Well, yeah, yeah, of course. We have a lot of text groups. I go camping with a buddy of mine that I worked with like 15 years ago. We go camping every year. We chat, once a month. We've got Instagram feeds where we send each other memes all day. And it's, every time something comes up on Facebook as a memory, we tag each other and say hi. And, we live very far apart now, but we still keep in touch. We still keep up with each other. Like, what are you doing? How's it going?
Yeah,
And I recently connected with a friend of mine I hadn't talked to in 10 years. And he and I just chatted for like 20 minutes one day, and we gave each other some advice. And all of a sudden, a week later, I'm like, dude, I got to talk to you again. Like, how's it going? What are you doing? What are you up to? And he said, thank you. That call changed my life. I'm doing all this stuff now that I was not doing and was not planning on doing until you called me. And I was like, damn, man, like I haven't talked to this guy in like 10 years, but we were very good on the truck. We had such a great relationship. We hung out a lot outside of work. And then as we moved jobs, you just kind of grow apart. It was such
yeah,
a great experience to be able to just chat with him and know that I made it that big of an impact on him, that we have that good of a connection that we can just talk 10 years later like nothing happened and be there
yeah,
for each
yeah.
other.
That's really cool. The more you talk about this, it makes me think how, so many people in the world we're in right now, they have no friends. Like
Hmm.
social media is, I mean, honestly, I feel like it's the opposite of it. Like people are just, these worlds, and especially, the older you get, it's hard to make friends, and so this almost sounds like a shortcut, you know, go be an EMT or a paramedic, and you're gonna walk away with some friends for the rest of your life. I think that's a fantastic selling point, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. And I also want to make sure that people know that you should also keep friends that are outside of your career, right? Because while I love navigating that difficulty and while I love having that conversation and we shared things and I will say things to them that I would say to nobody else in my life, including my wife, including my kids, we would have a conversation that I wouldn't otherwise have. You also have to have those people outside that you can have that regular connection with, that's not about like sharing the experience and the trauma that we go through, which is cathartic in itself, but it's good to also make sure that you have people outside of that to help you keep grounded, to help you know who
Yeah,
you are outside of EMS. I personally had the experience where my whole personality for a long time was that I am a paramedic. Like that is what I do. I'm on a plane. They're like, is there a medic on board? And I'm, yep, that's me. I just would jump and do it and help. And I found that that wasn't always giving me the best ability to help people the way I wanted to, because I was just kind of inserting myself in ways that I maybe shouldn't have, because I was looking for opportunities to be that helpful person. Um,
what
so
do you think there's a reason you gravitated towards that? Is there something about you or your past?
I had this conversation with so many people in my industry over the years because, to be quite frank, we have one of the highest suicide rates of all of the different career paths that you can choose, and it's because of the nature of the job. And so I've always said, it's like a chicken or an egg, right? I don't know if this job attracts people who are willing to look at that stuff, willing to look at the trauma and the terrible things that we have to see, or people who are more willing to commit suicide, or does the job just show them that and then they become this thing? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know. That would be a psychologist
yeah,
question, but I think it's important for people who are in the industry to continue to have that conversation, because I noticed that previously when I started, like people didn't talk about it. You don't talk about really the things you see. And there's always like, okay, just, take a break after a bad call or talk to somebody, but there's never any follow through. There's never this like, hey, talk to me. Never this like management stops and pulls you aside. And I didn't find that until the later years of my career. The last organization that I was with was actually pretty good about making sure that they took care of the people in that way. But the private companies that are those interfacility transport companies don't have that. And then the fire service, which is the big EMS provider in my area, all municipalities run EMS and fire together. They didn't know this yet. And so it has become a thing now in the industry to go ahead and address that and be able to talk about some of this stuff openly as well. So I really like the way the direction that the industry is heading with that.
yeah. Okay, that's good. Let me switch gears a little bit for you. So you're a paramedic. Is there some what? career wise, if you wanted to go further in this line of work, is there some place above that you can go to, or I mean, you're flying around an aircraft. I mean, is that the pinnacle?
For me, it was absolutely like when you get into the industry, or when I got into the industry, it was like, ooh, what do the best paramedics do? And it's like, oh, well, they fly, right? Like they get in the helicopter and they go see the worst patients. And it's this in training, they're like, hey, when you need help, you call the paramedic as an EMT. And when you're the paramedic, then you call the flight. And when you're on the flight, you're like, oh, who else is going to come? Nobody else is coming on at the top. So in my area, there's kind of, like I said, a couple of different ways. You can be a firefighter, which there has its own vertical integration of roles of responsibility. You have engineers who are driving the fire trucks. You have lieutenants, captains, and chiefs, battalion chiefs. All the different varying sizes of departments have the different roles and responsibilities. So there's that way. And if you don't want to be a firefighter, you are not given nearly as much opportunity for growth, right? You can either be in the field going and running the calls, or you can be doing management, or you can be doing logistics of some sort, dispatching, managing the ordering for the ambulances, or making sure that the trucks get fixed, and being a mechanic and that sort. But there's not usually a lot of layers between the bottom and the top guy, usually 2 or 3 layers, unless you're a massive organization, which there are some, right? They have some middle management, but for the most part, it's going to be smaller opportunity for vertical growth.
Okay. Okay. Is there a person you would say that this job is not for, or is for?
Ooh. If you are not compassionate, this job is not for you. You are going to see people on the worst day of their life. You're going to see a lot of people whose that's not the day. And it gets kind of annoying, frankly, when you get people who like really don't need your services, but are using them. In the industry, we call them frequent flyers. People who are like, I need to go to the hospital because for whatever reason, that's not a real emergency. And then it's like, okay, you're utilizing this resource that we have for real sick and injured people, and you're using it for something that's not what it's designed for. And so that does get a little bit annoying. So, but who's the job for is a lot less easy to answer. And the reason why is because really anybody who's good at dealing with people would be good for the job. You don't need to be a master clinician to be a really good provider. Okay. It doesn't take a lot of, you can memorize every drug calculation and every formula. You don't need to do that. You need to know how to utilize your resources. You need to know how to ask for help when you need help, and recognize when you need to ask for help. But most importantly, you need to be willing to just sit with people wherever they are, right? Like no matter their race, no matter their gender, no matter their agenda, no matter whatever it is they have going on, they really need you to just show up. My cats are going crazy now. So these are barn cats. We live in the middle of the woods. I live on 55 acres of nothing, and we have these cats, and they normally live outside, but my daughter loves having them inside, and so they live inside sometimes.
This is not the first cat incident on this show, by the way. So that's hilarious.
You're gonna leave. That's gonna stay in, I guess. Yeah.
Why not? I don't know. That was fantastic. Okay, I know you sort of alluded to it earlier, but if there were anything you could change about the career other than perhaps the pay, what might you want to change about it?
Yeah, well, I think the pay is really increasing. Communities like local governments and municipalities and states are starting to recognize that this is a pain point. So there's actually been almost a mass exodus of paramedics since COVID. The amount of enrollees new to EMT and paramedic school has gone down drastically. The amount of people who are retained in the workforce has gone down drastically. And so the workload didn't go down, but the amount of people doing it did go down. And so the industry sort of responded by starting to raise and increase the wages. But then, on the back end, that means they're going a lot mostly to government and insurance companies and having to renegotiate and get more money for that, which makes their premiums go up and all that fun stuff. But I think that the industry is getting better with that. I also think a lot of the issues that I took with the industry that I started with, like I said, organizations were not good at getting you the resources and support that you need as a person. They also were not great about making sure that we had like top-notch equipment. some of it was recycled, and stuff would break, and it's like, oh, we just have every day something breaks. And when it's just you and your partner out in the middle of whatever scene you happen to find yourself in, and you have this equipment that you've got to just make do with, you get really good at adapting and improvising to be able to treat this patient with whatever you can make do with. And so funding EMS in general would be the biggest thing that I would change about it. Like I said, I think a lot of it's getting better. People are recognizing how important it is. And there's also a big conversation right now in my state of Texas. They started relaxing the standards of what it took to become an EMT and how long you had to go to school for. I personally think that we need to be going the other direction, right? A lot of paramedics essentially have the same scope of practice as like a nurse does in an ER or in a hospital. We can do the same type of interventions. We can give the same drugs. We can do the same ventilations for the patient. We can operate the same, and we do a lot of the same things. And they have done a really great job as nurses at making sure they get recognized, and our industry is really lagging behind. And I think a lot of that goes to back to what I said earlier about being a patchwork of systems. So like we don't have a cohesive, national labor union for EMTs. It's you get small stuff and local stuff, and then it runs into political stuff. And so we just don't have a good national footprint to really advocate for us as large as we should be, as some as like the police and fire do. They've done a great job of being able to express their wants and their needs and go to their governments and go to the federal government and get stuff put in place where they can get funding and they can get accreditation and they can put national standards out that really reflect the good work that they're doing.
Okay. Why don't you tell us, let's do something positive. Tell us the best day, if you have a best day in this job that you recall.
That my best day on the job. That is a really tough one. I've had so many great days. I've had a couple of the goose eggs, the big golden zero where you run no calls. That's really great. One, because you get to sit down for a little bit and relax, maybe play a game on your phone and, doom scroll Instagram or whatever. But that means nobody is sick, right? I've had really great days where I've really connected with my patients and become, not friends with them, but friendly with them. And I've really seen, I got to work in pediatric population for, 9 years. And so being able to see a kid's face go from hurt and crying to smiling and laughing, like that's something that I really thrived on, was being able to help people in that way. And it's not possible every day. So any day that you can do that is really the best day for me.
I mean, so it's a true statement that you have personally saved people's lives, right?
Yes, I've been there when they have done it.
So whatever you did, your protocol that you followed saved. How many people do you think have been the result of what you've done, the work you've done?
I'm not totally sure, but I wouldn't really reflect upon it as myself as like how many people did I save, but how many people did I impact, right? Because even if you aren't having this life-threatening injury and you just have a little broken arm and you need an ambulance ride, like if I can make your day better through that, like I can do that all day, every day, right? I can do that with the cashier at the grocery store, and I can smile and I can be kind and I can make an impact in your day. And I just happened to choose this job, this career where I was able to do it on a little bit more impactful scale, where I'm able to help, give them this medication that helps them. And I'm able to, provide this for them in a way that they wouldn't able otherwise have. So I've had some people ask me too, how do you deal with it? And how do you, like, if you can't save somebody, what do you do? And I personally reflect on it. Like I've done enough work through my career and made sure that I was studying and made sure that I was up to date on my protocols and went to the training and watched the videos and learned from my peers and asked questions to make sure that no matter what the scenario, I was able to provide my patient with the highest quality care. So even if they have a bad outcome, I'm able to go home at night and know, like, I gave them, there's nobody that anybody, let me rephrase that. There's nothing nobody else would have been able to give them in a different way that would have had them get a different outcome than what I was able to provide for them.
Right. Right. So as long as you know that you did what you can do,
Yeah.
what else is there? So
Yeah, exactly. I've
That's a
done
great.
everything that there is possible. There's nobody else besides a physician or a higher level of care that is not here, is not me, is not wearing this patch. Like if they were here, they could do something different. But in this role, this is all that anybody could ever do in this role. And I feel like I did it well, and I provided that extra companionship and that personalization and being there as a person for them as they navigated that as well. I think is why I felt like I did it better.
Yeah. All right. Would you be willing to reveal a time that maybe you made a big mistake or something embarrassing happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of embarrassing stuff that happens, right? You're with people, 12, 24 hours at a time in a little small box. There's a lot of embarrassing moments. So, um, but I can recall the most significant, really, I don't know if it was a mistake. It was really a freeze for me. I was a little baby medic. I had just barely been released on my very first ambulance. That's like, oh, this is my ambulance. I'm running the show. I'm the paramedic with an EMT partner. They're looking at me, knowing what to do. We picked the gentleman up, and he was not in great shape. And to be honest, I kind of froze. I couldn't get the IV, and I was like, oh, I don't know what to do here. Just get in the ambulance. We'll just drive fast. We'll lights and sirens, and I'll try and figure out what's going to happen because I know we need to leave now, and we don't have time to do anything else. So my partner jumped in the front, turned on the lights and sirens, and I'm in the back, like flipping through my protocols, like, oh, I don't know what to do next. Where am I at? No, it's not this. No, it's not that. And all of a sudden, we're at the hospital, and I hadn't done a single thing since then. We rushed him into the hospital, into the ER. Nurses were able to get an IV just like that, which just drove me nuts, of course, because I'm like, I just tried and I couldn't do it. So it's, all these heightened emotions. And I got back to the station that day, and I just sat and I reflected. I was like, I don't want to ever experience that again. I don't want to feel like I don't know what to do. And that's why I said just a moment ago, like I can do all these things. I know my protocols. I know my approach. I know what I'm supposed to do. And I know when to call and ask for help, and I know I don't have to do that. And so it was setting myself up for success by knowing I didn't want to ever feel helpless to help somebody else again.
Yeah. So it kind of plays back into what you'd said earlier about if you know that you studied and did everything that you could do, then that makes everything you can sleep well knowing that. So maybe
Yeah.
that maybe that incident had something to do with there's my mindset now and I'm going to
Hmm.
know it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got lucky. There's a lot of people that I know that um, don't have, or that do have some lingering issues like PTSD and other psychological issues that I so far I've never been diagnosed or anything with. But that doesn't mean I don't have my own issues. And so, the way that lives is different for everybody. And so, really, some people haunt themselves over mistakes that they made, and some people learn from them. And it really just kind of depends on who you are and where you are.
Okay. And so you after doing paramedic for a while, you became a dispatcher, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Would you
So,
like why did
I'd love to
you
tell you
do
about it.
it? Yeah, well, first of all, tell us why you decided to do that, and then also maybe a little bit about what a dispatcher does.
Yeah. So, easy decision. It wasn't made for me. So it was my body made the decision for me. And in March of 2021, I was playing some basketball with my daughter, and all of a sudden I felt like, oh, my back hurts. And, 3 days later, I can't stand up. I can't walk. I can't do anything. And I had a severely bulged disc in my back. And so over the course of the next 2 weeks, we tried, increasingly invasive procedures. And finally, they said, you're going to have surgery. You're going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, well, I can't lift a 60-pound bag and climb into a helicopter or an airplane if I can't lift over 5 pounds after the surgery. So when I came back, I was put on light duty until I could, do all my physical therapy. And so they said, hey, since you can't work as a flight paramedic, why don't you go sit in the dispatch center and you can work as a communication specialist? So I moved over to the access center over where I worked. And it not only was the dispatch center for all of the teams, but it's also the transfer coordination center between our hospital entity and every outer line hospital that needed to send into us. And since we were one of the preeminent children's facilities in the area, there's a lot of people that need to come in and out every day. And so I really started enjoying that. And I ended up going into leadership in that position because I was like, oh, well, if I can do it really well myself and I enjoy it, maybe I'll enjoy leading people, which I really do enjoy leading people. And so I got the opportunity to lead that department for a couple of years. And then once we built it up a little bit, they decided they wanted to focus a little bit more and put some more personnel in who were going to do more of the transfers and the bed management and stuff. And so that role would be much better suited by somebody who's an RN. And so we decided, like, let's put the right person in the position so that he can succeed with this new growth of the department. But I really enjoyed when I stepped down from management, I stepped back to just being a dispatcher. And so that's, transferring or not transferring. So that's taking all the information that we get about a transfer coming in and we send it to the team and we have to decide what mode they're going to transport by. We have to give them an ETA. We have to coordinate with the outer line facility, and sometimes we even have to get an ambulance to meet our jet wherever we're going. So it's really just a lot of logistical stuff. We also would make sure that the physician conference that happened, we would help get that patient admitted to our hospital. So we would do the initial call, and so think if your kid gets into a car accident or something out in the middle of the country, and they bring him to the local hospital, there's not a pediatric facility there. So they would call us and we would say, yes, we want to, treat your patient here at our pediatric facility, which you can't do there. And then we would determine what level of care they would need once they arrived at the facility. Then we would send our transport team to go get them because we have a pediatric certified team as opposed to the local EMS, whatever is out there. And we had a helicopter and a jet. So it's very easy to get to a lot of places very quickly. And so we would then send our team and dispatch them. As an air traffic controller, I never had my Part 121 or Part 135. So I didn't technically dispatch the jets. They self-dispatched. I just requested that they look at a flight and dispatch themselves. So don't want to get in trouble with the FAA and the dispatching the flights out on that.
They're coming for you now.
Yeah.
All right. So we had Kathy on the show before. She was a nurse. And one of the things she talked a lot about was how private equity is kind of affecting nursing, at least in the hospitals. Have you seen any effect on private equity on the EMS services that you've been working with?
Yeah. One of the companies that I worked for that was a private company, at the time that I started working for them, they acquired the company I was working for. So they called it a merger, but long story short, it was a weird merger. And it was private equity backed by a very prominent rich guy. And when they came in, they were like, you guys are getting new trucks, you're getting new equipment, everybody's getting a raise. We want to do the right thing. That means if you get to somebody's house and they have a light bulb out, you go get the light bulb and you screw it into their light bulb and provide top-notch service. And then it very quickly went to not that. It was like, how quick can you turn around? We need you on the other side of town, 40 miles away right now. And I'm going to cross 3 trucks because we just have this massive company that's hard to manage logistics now. We went from having, what was it, like 17 trucks to 47 trucks in like a day when the merger finally happened. And all of a sudden we've just got all of these ambulance and all these apparatus and all these locations and all these calls. And it was a really interesting way to watch a merger happen. But, private equity, my wife does a lot of work with private equity as well in her work. And so I get to hear some of the stories, but essentially they just want profit. And then there is meager profit in EMS. Like I said, it's a patchwork system. There's not a lot of money into it. But interestingly enough, there is a lot of fraud that happens on ambulances. So if you, or not if you, we were at every company I worked for, we were very strict about you document exactly what you saw as far as ambulance necessity. Don't lie about anything. So not implicating anybody. Everything we did was on up and up. However, there are companies that would fraudulently write reports about people's medical necessity in order to get paid by the government. And typically when you own an EMS company, you get paid by the government automatically for everything you bill for like 6 months, and they don't even look at the report. And so what would happen is these people would open a company, buy the assets, bill the government for 6 months, and then boom, shut down at 6 months, day one, sell themselves the equipment again, start a new company, get a new contract, do it again. And they were running through it. There was actually a moratorium at one point in the state of Texas about new EMS provider licensure because it was such a big problem. In Houston was a specific area. And I know Philadelphia was another hotbed of it. Just really interesting because you don't want to get asked as a provider, your license is at stake if you write down something that's false. So I wouldn't knowingly say this person can walk when we just decided to take him on an ambulance. I would, I wouldn't lie about that. It's like, no, he can walk, and then they wouldn't get paid. And so you do have to manage the company's expectations of what they want to get paid and word things in a certain way, but you also can't lie.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. So I just watched this movie called Code 3. It's about paramedics. I was excited to watch it knowing that you're going to be coming on the show. And I don't think it was a great movie, but, and I would imagine as a paramedic, you probably watch it and you're like, anytime I watch a movie with air traffic control, I can't even really watch it because it's just so far like, this is not real, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, there was a lot of interesting quotes they said on the show. The Rainn Wilson, I think is the name. He would look at the camera occasionally and he would say something. And I wanted just to get your take on one of the comments he said, and you can tell me what you think. He said, he looked at the camera at one point. He said, "This job breaks everybody." And I'm just curious what you might say about that.
This job breaks everybody. Yeah, I think there's a truth to that. Um, it doesn't break you in ways that you might expect. I think because you expect to see blood and violence and gore and tragedy and car accidents and people burned and, all of the things you would expect to ever see on an ambulance when you get called for 911. And the people who don't have a good way to handle that information tend to end up a little bit more affected quickly than the people who don't have it. And I think everybody is affected by it, but it really boils down to how much are you letting it affect you and how much are you telling yourself that it's happening or how much are you, dissociating from that feeling. I've known a lot of people, myself included, you just kind of got to numb out when you're not at work. So I would used to drink a lot. I would go home and, as soon as I get off a shift and it's just like, I got to drink a little bit, like calm my body down. And part of that is that you're experiencing being on edge for however long you're on shift. So if you're on a 24-hour shift or if you're on a 12-hour shift, you were on edge waiting for an emergency to happen at any given point. And so it's like not just waiting for something to happen, but waiting for an emergency to happen. Is it going to be a kid trapped under a car or is it going to be somebody who stepped on a dog brush? Like I don't know which one it's going to be, but I've got to be ready just the same to go and run and get in my vehicle or get in the helicopter or get in a plane. And I've got to exert those forces and flight dynamics on my body to go get there. And it does break a little part of you. My body broke, my mind wasn't great. I'll say that. Right. But my body physically broke. I always assumed that as this big guy, I'm 6'4", about 250. And so like, I'm just a big guy and it's like, oh, I can just go pick the stretcher up and it's got all this stuff on it. It weighs 450 pounds and carry the bariatric stretcher and just lift the bag. And like, I didn't take care of my body the way that I needed to. And my body broke.
Do you think that, so you had mentioned your back got messed up while you're playing basketball with your daughter. Do you think that it was already being damaged from the career itself?
I could blame it on genetics. So funny enough, my dad had the same problem 30 years ago in the same area and then had to have the same surgery and it ended his firefighting career. And so when I was a kid, I grew up, my dad, he was in the fire service and all of a sudden he wasn't, but I didn't really correlate the injury. I was a little young at the time. Like I didn't know what he was going through with that injury and with the job change. And so for him and watching that, it's like, I didn't know that it was going to break my body. I don't know if I just didn't take care enough. Maybe it was, I used to play a lot of basketball and run and like, I wrestled for years in high school and I never really just took care of myself. And so maybe it's all of it. Maybe it's just the job and the lifting wrong. I don't know. But I highly recommend, if you've never read it, reading The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. So are you familiar with the book?
I'm familiar with it because my wife quotes it to me all the time.
Yeah.
She's like, "Did you see what's in there?" I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So I have to give a big shout out to my wife who is doing this research and taking courses on this, college level and beyond courses about how your body reacts to all this stuff. And she's trying to tell me, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And I'm blocking out. And all of a sudden my back breaks and I'm like, can you tell me a little bit more? Like, what do I need to
Yeah.
figure out? Because I'll be very honest, you know, my entire persona, like I said, was really based on me being a paramedic. Like I owned that. That was my personality. And when you were laying in a bed, unable to physically move, it really put me in a dark spot for a little bit of like, like, what if I can't do this again? What if I can't fly again? What if I can't be a paramedic again? What if I can't walk again? Like, what if they just can't fix this or the surgery happens or, all these are flooding through. And so I had to learn how to navigate that. And if you're interested, Body Keeps the Score is a really great, comprehensive, although thick and dense way to understand how that actually works. And so that actually was part of the reason I transitioned to what I'm doing now is being able to start learning how all of that works and wanting to be able to give that knowledge to the people that didn't already have it. People like you and me, like middle-aged guys, is really like we don't take good care of ourselves and we don't eat well and we don't have a cohort or group of good friends that we get together with frequently. Like you said earlier, like it's just this social media. I'm going to quote one of my favorite rappers, Sage Francis. He's like, technology made it easy for us to keep in touch while keeping our distance. Now all we do is stay distant and never touch. And all we do is text too much. And it's like, oh man, that's so
It's a
true.
great line. It's a
I'm just
great
keeping
line.
my distance and I'm texting and it feels like connection, but it's not connection.
Right.
And the AI movement is not connection. It's not real. And we need that as people. And I think that's a big missing. And EMS is actually good about putting that cohort around you. Specifically, what I witnessed was the fire service, right? It's the brotherhood. It's this put their arms around you. Like we've got you, you're in the group, much like you said earlier, the military. And it's kind of like when you're in the in crowd, you're in the crowd. And you do have that to back you up. Now that does have its own, downfalls too. In Texas, I've seen it become a little bit of an old boys club that is not great. So like that I've known people to not treat women paramedics and EMTs with the same respect that they show some of the guys. And I've known people to just be disrespectful to people in general. And so, if you're not part of their crowd. And so it's really, that's where I'm saying the industry has gotten better. That's less of a thing as we become more diverse and we get more voices and more personalities to come into this industry. It's important that everybody who's going to be helped by us be represented as well, I think.
Yeah. I almost don't know if I want to know the answer to this question, but you make me wonder, did did you ever witness anyone or anybody say in a way that, well, I don't want to go treat this person or that person, like by the
Oh
way they
yeah.
look or what have you?
Yeah. I mean, not based on the way they look, but mostly based on the type of call. When you get a call and you're like, there's a drunk unknown guy face down somewhere, like, okay, it's gonna be whatever I make this story out to be. It's gonna be a homeless guy and he's gonna be drunk and I don't want to take him and he's gonna be sick. People will say that. Um, I found that working with my partners, it was easy to kind of grumble on the way to a call, but I've never been one to tolerate grumbling at that patient, right? Like they don't deserve your ire. They don't deserve your upset. You've got to manage that. Like you could be upset about the call and you could say it's a stupid call, but like just go run the call, be compassionate, be empathetic. Like it doesn't require you to be a jerk to go run a call and help somebody, even if they're in the wrong and you're in the right. Just do the right thing. And so there are people who don't want to. And I was fortunate enough at several destinations in my journey to be able to be a leader and call people out for that. Like that's not behavior I'm going to tolerate as the leader. Like we need to work together and we need to respect each other. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And people do whatever they're going to do anyway. And you got to deal with the consequences.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about the lifeguard flights. I can tell you from my perspective, when I was a brand new air traffic controller, uh, there was a lifeguard flight. They said they needed to transition through my airspace. It was a helicopter, and they said they were on the way to rescue a child. I didn't get more of the story than they needed to go get a young kid, and I said, okay, great. they transition through their space, and then I'm still there, and half hour later, and then they come trucking right back on through, going back the other way. And I made the mistake of asking them how it went, and it wasn't a positive response. And I never asked that question again for the rest of my career. I let you guys go out and do what you do, and I don't need to know how it's going. With that said, I'd like to hear more stories about the lifeguard flying that you did. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I worked for an organization that was a hospital. It's a pediatric hospital, and we had three modes of transport. So we had an ambulance if we wanted to go by ground for non-high acuity calls, or we could take kids even between appointments if necessary, between our buildings or between our own hospitals, or if it was too close to fly, we would take an ambulance. Then we had a helicopter, which was a Sikorsky S-76, and then we had a fixed wing jet that was a Citation Encore 2. Yeah. And we would take that a little bit longer distances. So, from the dispatch point of view, we would use the distance and the acuity in a matrix to be able to determine how are we going to go get this kid. So, how sick are they? Where are they going in the hospital? And how far away are they? And then we'd put it in our matrix and we say, okay, they're not sick enough and they're not very far away. So, we're going to go by ground, or they're very sick and they're very far away. We'll go by fixed wing, and then all manners in between it. And so, as the responder who was working, we would get a page with a pager. Yep, it's still a real thing. And it would tell us the mode and then tell us where we were going and a little short story of that. And we would just hop in whichever mode of transport that we would go to. And we had, of course, communications. We had helmets in the helicopter, and we had headphones in the aircraft to be able to listen to our pilots, communicate with ATC. And I never got on the radio, but wow, you guys can talk. And I am just so amazed with like the deliberate words and enunciation and like the way that you guys manage all of the pilots. And then figure out, okay, I got a medevac coming in now too that I wasn't planning on. I got to put it in my rotation and get them into the pattern. So, uh, like kudos to you and your field for the way that you were able to navigate all of that. And just listening to it is astonishing. But I learned so much about, as somebody who'd never heard a conversation between a pilot and air traffic control, like I learned so much just by listening. And I had a lot of opportunity to work with some really great pilots, both with the
Mhm.
fixed wing and with the rotor wing. So, these pilots are just amazing. You've got to have more hours to be able to be a medevac pilot. And so, these people showed up with a lot of experience and a lot of heart and a lot of character to work with us, and to be able for them who are not medical personnel to be able to, be in the same aircraft with us who's transporting this critically ill patient. So you can look back and see how bad they're doing, and you still got to do it. And then you also get that experience of that tragedy. You're not just, away from it because you're up in the front flying. But I did have some great experiences. There was a hurricane that came to the coast, and we worked with 3 to 4 other pediatric transport agencies to fly into the area where the hurricane was coming and transport all of their neonates out to the Dallas area so that we could get all of the kids out of the hurricane path. And I was on what I was believed the last flight out that night, and the hurricanes got the two arms, and we had to fly south like towards Mexico to get around the arm and then fly all the way back up, so we didn't fly in between it. And then we had this older prop plane, and when there was too many people in the back, the paramedic got to sit up front with the pilot because that was a single pilot aircraft. And so I got to go sit up in the cockpit. He's like, first off, don't touch anything. Go like, all right, cool, but I'm still up in like I don't have to touch anything to enjoy this. So he's like, hands me the checklist. He's like, all right, start at the top, read down. So we start at the top, read down, go through the checklist, and all of a sudden we're in the air. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever to be able to just sit up in front. Like, I'm not flying, but how cool. And it was a stormy day. So there's these giant, massive thunderheads rolling from right and left. And so we're like, all right, let's go over here. And then we'll cut back. And I'm like helping him create this flight plan midair. And it was just really a blast to be able to be in some of those positions. And
Yeah, that's cool.
the acuities of which we would go to the calls, that's like where all the serious calls are too, or the flights. And so, being able to help those kids at that time really felt great as well as getting fly in the helicopter plane is super fun.
Yeah. You keep making me think about all the times in my career that we've had lifeguard helicopters or fixed wing. Usually, I can't say it was ever fixed wing, but have controlled flight into terrain, and everybody perishes. And I can only imagine it's because you guys push it more than maybe you should in a given weather situation because you want to help somebody. And that's pretty rough. I've seen that many times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we had a mantra and it was 3 to go, 1 to say no. So if anybody feels like for any reason this flight is not safe, we're not going on a flight. That starts with the dispatcher who takes the call. It's then goes to the pilots and then goes to the crew. And everybody has to be congruent. We all have to be aligned on this decision. We are all going. And or if we feel like we can't make it safely there and back, we're not going. It's not worth our lives or the patient's life for us to try and navigate this in this mode of transport. We'll figure out a
Yeah.
different way around it.
Interesting. Well, thanks for that insight. I didn't. Yeah. Okay. You'd mentioned earlier about your playing basketball with your daughter, and it makes me wonder about. And you also mentioned how this affects your friendships. But how does this job affect your family? Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, that actually brings up kind of a core memory of this that Mexico trip I told you about earlier. And my wife and I were sitting there, and I think we might have been drinking some tequila, as one will do in Mexico. And she looked at me and she says, like, are you willing to die for this? Like, this seems like this career will put you in a collision course like firefighters, EMTs, flight medics, like they have a higher rate of death. If you're going to be running into burning buildings and you're going to be flying, if you're going to be putting yourself at risk for people you don't know, how is that worth it for me? How does that relate to our family? And like, how am I supposed to feel about that? And so we had to navigate that through the way. And I think my response at the time, I was 21 and it's, kind of a juvenile, like, what if you save like the next Einstein or the next president? Or like, what if you just save anybody in the process? Like, right? Like, why would my life be more valuable than anybody else's? Like, if I could save 100 people and it cost my one life, but I was able to get to save 100 people, would that be worth it? Like, do I only have to save 5? Like, the math is not mathing at anything beyond 2. Like, seems worth it, right? And so at the time, I didn't realize the depth of really what I was saying, what I was committing myself to. And, as of we're taping this, just recently there was a helicopter crash in California, and the helicopter had engine failure and it crashed. And luckily, it didn't explode. But I have been fortunate enough in my career to not personally know anybody that has had a line of death duty. But I know a lot of people that know a lot of people, and it's a very small community. And um, it affects all of us when something happens to that. I'm not even a paramedic as of a year now. And seeing that made me like tear up a little bit. Every flight I took, I would text my wife, I love you. I'm flying to here. Like, here's where I am. Here's where I'm flying. Anything comes through the news that's in between those, like, send me a little prayer, do a little prayer. I'm not even, overly religious person, but just knowing all of what can go wrong and willingly putting myself in that position, I had to kind of make a little fortitude and tell my
Yeah.
wife every day, I love you. And my kids really didn't know the difference. They always knew me as a paramedic, and they were frankly quite upset when I quit. And when I decided I didn't want to do it anymore, they're like, why are you not doing that anymore? Like, I tell my friends that you go fly in a helicopter and you save kids. Why don't you want to do that? And I even had a friend of mine get upset with me, and he was like, why would you not do this anymore? Like, this is what you were supposed to do, and we're supposed to be in this together. And they were allowing my identity to be part of their identity. And so me
Wow.
holding on to, I'm a paramedic, and then my friends holding on to, well, we're paramedics, like, put a little fracture in between our relationship because I'm no longer in that in group. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I was, like I said, I finished paramedic school a couple of days before my oldest daughter was born, and she's 16 now. And so for her, she always knew that I was gone every third night because I was a 24-hour shift for, 6 years. And then I worked overnight and I would sleep during the day, and she would play on my like lifelike, my lifeless corpse of sleeping on the floor when she's 3 and my wife's at work and I'm just dead tired from working and sleeping and she's just playing with me. And, we laugh about that a lot still. She's like, I got a lot of freedom when I was young because you just sleep all the time. And my life has been so much more impacted with my kids over this last year since I did transition careers. Being able to say goodnight to them every night and being able to say good morning to them every morning. If you're on a call, you can't pick up your phone. When the flights start coming in the morning, you got no time for anything personal. Like you're going to be on the radio all day, right? There's just you lose that connection. And I did that for so many years that I really kind of knew it was time especially when I said like I stepped down from manager to being just a dispatcher again. I was like, it's time for me to find a different way for me to do this, a different way to go forward that really is empowering for me and my wife and my family is really where I was at. COVID, I think, had us all relook at our priorities. Where are we spending our time? Who are we spending our time with? Like I want more of my family. I want more of my kids. I love my kids. I love my wife, and I want to spend all of my time that I can with them. And that job wasn't allowing me to do that because, for where I was at, I needed a little bit more money and I just needed to work the hours for that. And it led down to I just at work a lot.
Yeah. I am curious. So, if we go back to that beach scene where you were saying to your wife, if I save 100, then, how important am I? I'm curious what her response was. Do you remember?
Uh, I think it's the same now. Like, why would you risk it? Why would you risk who you are to me and who you are to your kids? Why would you risk that and leave us without you? And so we've never really seen fully eye to eye on that. I think for her, it was like, I just kind of have to accept it. From what we talked about is that was kind of a response. Like, I just have to accept it. It's his decision and he's going to choose to do it or not do it until he's done with it. And then I kind of have to live with that. And for me, it was really making sure that I'm making decisions out of what is the best for me and my family and in my own life. What is the most healthy version of me that I can be for these people who need me? And so when it was like the work life balance wasn't quite there enough, I needed to take a step back and do something different. And, there's a lot of medics who make it work and they make enough money for the way their lifestyle was. But my wife and I have kind of um, we've taken lead. Like one of us will work a lot more than the other one will. And then the other one will kind of work a lot more. And we kind of take turns, going to school, not going to school. And so it was just my turn to work a little bit more. And now I'm able to work now. I actually work with my mom and with my sister. And so I get a lot of family time. I work from the house. So I get to see my kids every day, my wife every day. I get to chat with my mom and my dad and my sister, on a daily basis. So uh, it was this family thing that they know me to be as a paramedic just kind of turned into this next thing.
Yeah. All right. So maybe you were getting kind of alluding it to there. I know you're doing this executive coach thing now. Why don't you tell us about that? Is that what you were talking about with your mom working with her,
Yeah.
or what's that?
So I about 2.5 years ago started a program that is for coaches, so life coaches, and working with people, not athletic coaching, but working with people one on one to help them achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve that they haven't gotten yet by helping them identify certain patterns, behaviors, and digging into why those exist. It's not therapy, but it can be therapeutic because you do talk a lot about like meaning and how you're responding to it and how you're relating to it. And I was able to go to the next level certification beyond that as a professional coach. And my mom and I were talking one day. She's been doing this type of work for 30 years. And she said, listen, I've got some big programs that I need some help with. And so if you want to come on full time, we can work these programs together now that you've got the certifications. And I was like, okay, a chance to work with my family and have a little bit better work life balance and do something completely different than what I'm doing is like what a great opportunity. And so now what we do is we have programs where we help people one-on-one, individual. So I work with a lot of leaders and executives at global companies who are struggling to maybe find their footing or learning how to become a leader if they've never been a leader before, a leader of people. and what it takes, what skills, what capabilities they're going to need to have come on board. And then I'm personally really interested in your personal development in the context of business, right? So when you lead people and you show up with them a certain way and you have your own triggers, how well are you able to define those triggers? How well are you able to see your own biases, and how well are you able to identify your own blind spots of ways that you're being that you might not even realize, but the people
Hmm.
around you realize, right? So like
Yeah.
I know that I have certain ways of acting and certain behaviors that are a little unbecoming to me, and I can't see them because I'm me and I have on these like rose colored glasses of the way that I act. And so I have to be really yeah, I have to be really outgoing to go find what those areas are of how I'm being that's impacting people that I might want to be introspective about and change, or maybe not change. But then I can have this conscious decision of how do I want to show up every day, right? Do I want to be a leader who's known for being open and listening? Do I want to be known as a leader who's decisive, who can take action, who has all the answers? Do I want to be known as the leader who's able to delegate everything and find the right people for the job and not actually have to do much, but look at the big picture? And then we've also got programs now. We just put out our first online program. It's based in something called the immunity to change method. And so what we do is we help people identify some hidden barriers that keep them and prevent them from getting better at any area they want to get better at. So think about it like if you've had an experience over the last couple of months where you've thought to yourself like I need to get better at that, or dang I really should do that and I don't know why I can't, or I don't know why I can't change this pattern, or why I can't figure out this thing that I've been trying to make stick. We go through this 4-hour online course that's self-paced where you find what are your core beliefs and what are these commitments that you hold to yourself that you are completely unaware of that keep those patterns in place, right? So like in my history as a paramedic, it was not taking care of myself physically, my body. I wasn't stretching. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't getting good sleep at night. I was drinking too much. I was too interested in, less sleep and doing all these things that were really terrible for my body. And what I was able to see is like these patterns and behaviors that I'm exemplifying are really actually destroying me and not helping me with anything. So, how to identify like what is a problem for me and what do I want to get better at? And so, we put this program online. It's normally we lead it in person, but we figured out how to record it and put it online. And we can help you find all of those things too to make improvement at whatever it is that you want to get better at. And so for me, that's really inspiring because I was so used to helping people on an ambulance that now I'm just interested, like what can I do to help you be the best you outside of the medical arena?
Interesting. Okay. Um, all right. Final question. Everybody gets the same question. What is a secret about being a paramedic that most people would not know?
On your run report, we may not have counted all your respirations. No, I'm kidding. We always do. If anybody ever goes back on my reports, we do. Um, no, the secret about EMS. Um, I think a lot of us wear the secrets out in the open, right? Um, the secret is it's really a tough job. Some people make it look really easy. Some people make it look a lot tougher than it is, but it requires you showing up authentically, and it requires you showing up with a compassion for people that you might not currently hold, that you really have to work on getting better at if you don't currently have it. And another secret would be that it's amazing. You know, you may not realize the impact that this job will have on you is going to be tremendous, whether it's good or bad. It's going to be tremendous impact on your life. And so I don't think people always get into it knowing the impact that it'll be, like, oh, it'll be easy and I'll run calls and I'll go home. But you get calls that stay with you and you get to know people and you create this life that just would be otherwise unimaginable if you weren't in the job.
Wow. That's really cool. Great answer.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Alex. Alex, that's it. I'm glad you came on the show. I really appreciate your time. And I think it's a fantastic career. I didn't realize all the friends you can make. So this is awesome.
Yeah, I love it so much. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come tell you and the rest of the internet a little bit more about it. Like I said, it's a great job. You should absolutely look into volunteering for a local fire department. Would be something if you're interested in becoming a paramedic. Like Go volunteer somewhere. Go ask for a ride along. Go to your local hospital and see if they'll let you volunteer, where you can be a little inundated and learn about it and see if it's for you and see if it's intriguing, because there's a lot of great aspects about it.
Excellent. All right, Alex, thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shane.
That was Alex Bednar, an incredible paramedic who told us everything about the career. I can say that I would have never considered this career. I felt the pay would have been issues, but now that he's described the lifelong friends you make and other experiences you have, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Sounds pretty cool. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and let us know what you think. And if you have an interesting job, then email me at talesfromtheshiftpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see about getting you on here. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later.